What if the power to foresee the future was in your hands, but every time you used it, you risked losing someone you loved? Welcome to Happiness of Love, your daily dose of K-dramas. Get ready to fall in love with unforgettable stories. Can you tell us where are you listening from? A cold sweat clung to Emily's brow as her fingers trembled over the smooth surface of the paper, a frenetic energy driving her hand into a hasty frenzy. The art studio, usually a sanctuary, felt suffocating as shadows danced maliciously along the walls. She had long since learned that drawing could unveil more than mere beauty, it could conjure nightmares. Tonight, the urge to sketch was an overwhelming force, but what emerged from her mind's eye was a dark tableau that made her stomach churn. She could almost hear the echo of sirens wailing in the distance, slicing through the night stillness as she sketched the lifeless body of a man sprawled in an alley, blood pooling around him like a dark halo. The reality of her talent, the inexplicable gift that had haunted her ever since she could remember, surged tumultuously within her as she committed every detail to the page. She worked feverishly, charcoal etching lines that seemed to bleed into the paper itself, creating a visceral depiction that left her gasping for breath. With a frantic heart, she realized she needed to stop, to regain control over her thoughts and actions that felt almost foreign. Throwing her materials aside, Emily felt the weight of the drawing press down upon her, its ominous energy vibrating against her skin. The vision of death was a reminder of her struggles, how the universe seemed to reward her creativity with flashes of grim reality. Shoving the drawing away, she desperately locked it in the drawer of her desk, hoping to imprison the horror she had unlatched from her subconscious. She chastised herself for losing focus, for succumbing to an unwelcome spiral of anxiety that pushed her deeper into solitude. The hour grew late, and silence enveloped her, broken only by the soft ticking of the wall clock, a constant reminder of time slipping away. She often relished her reclusive lifestyle, surrounded by brushes and canvases that breathed life into her imagination. An acclaimed illustrator and part-time art teacher respected among her peers, she guarded her gift jealously, refusing to let anyone pry into the depths of her creativity. The exhibition pieces she shared with the world were vibrant and joyful, utterly devoid of the ominous undertones that lurked in her more personal sketches. It was easier to hide within the frames of others' lives than confront the weight of her own foreseeing. Yet, that night, the sanguine scene she had drawn could no longer be ignored. What if it came to pass? The thought clawed at her insides and she squeezed her eyes shut, desperate to obliterate the image from her mind. Darkness seeped ever deeper, filling the space around her until it felt heavy and all-consuming. Why couldn't she simply be normal? She longed to shake off the unease that had become an unwanted companion. Frustration coursed through her veins as she imagined normal nights filled with laughter, companionship, and wild dreams that didn't usher in the specters of destiny. With an uneasy sigh, she paced the dim room, trying to erase the foreboding presence of the drawing. Each step echoed her sense of dread, drowned out only by the thudding of her heart. But deep down, she understood that locking away the torment was a temporary reprieve. Fate had a funny way of revealing itself, and her talent was a double-edged sword, slicing through the fabric of her carefully constructed life. Little did she know, the blurred line between her cursed gift and the fate she aimed to elude was about to unravel, leading her unwittingly toward ties that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and the world around her. Days later, the sun hung low above the bustling streets of Seoul, casting a golden hue over the everyday chaos, yet Emily felt as if a storm loomed in the distance. With her sketchbook tucked under her arm, she had ventured out for the first time in weeks, an insatiable urge to capture the vibrant essence of the city overwhelming her usual reticence. She settled onto a park bench, the earthy scent of damp soil exhilarating her senses as she brushed her pencil lightly against the page. Just as she began to lose herself in the familiar rhythm of her art, something stirred in the periphery of her vision. It was then that she caught sight of him, David Lee, the very man who had invaded her mind during that turbulent night of insomnia, the details of his face still fresh from her nightmare. He stood across the street, just as handsome as she'd imagined but equally unaware of the danger that loomed, engrossed in his phone. The moment their eyes met, a jolt surged through her, as if the world around them had faded away, leaving only that singular connection fraught with urgency. As he moved deeper into the crowd, a sense of horror washed over her, a reverberating echo of the gruesome scene she had instinctively sketched: the blood, the lifelessness. Panic gripped her heart. She felt like a puppet on a string, torn between the desire to scream, to grab hold of him, and the knowledge that she might just be thrusting him into peril. The sensation was nearly suffocating, so she picked up her backpack, and almost without thinking, she dashed toward him, her breath quickening with each hurried step. "David!" she called out, her voice strained with urgency, cutting through the dense noise of the city. He turned, eyebrows furrowing in confusion, the abruptness of her appearance clearly unsettling him. Emily's heart raced as she approached, fighting to make her words coherent. She could see the sturdy resolve he wore like armor, but she was determined to shatter that barrier. Meeting his puzzled gaze, she stammered, I'm the one from the alley. The drawing. You need to listen to me. He eyed her skeptically, though there was a flicker of intrigue behind his sharp features. All due respect, lady, but I've seen my fair share of conspiracy theorists. What do you want from me? Emily felt the weight of despair wash over her. How could she possibly convince him that she held a truth he needed to see? It felt maddeningly impossible, and while David's skepticism stung, this was not just about her art. It was about his life. Trying to draw him in, she whispered fervently, "You are in danger. I don't know how else to explain it, but I drew you, and it was?" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "It was a horrific sight. I've never seen you before, but I knew things that night, things that are not supposed to happen." For a moment, the tension filled the air between them like a taut string, ready to snap. David's facade of disbelief began to crack ever so slightly, his gaze wavering as disbelief morphed into curiosity. "Look, you're clearly distressed," he replied, voice softening, "but you can't walk up to someone and suggest they're about to be murdered without grounds. It sounds like you need professional help." Emily grimaced at his dismissal, feeling lost in a chasm of frustration as something dark worked its way beneath her skin, a cold chill whispering of a greater truth that none of them had yet grasped. As she opened her mouth to protest further, David's attention veered behind her, his expression shifting swiftly from amusement to alarm. Without warning, the surreal became real. Several men emerged from the shadows, eyes focused with dangerous intent. Emily felt her breath hitch in her throat as everything fell into a whirlwind of chaos. "David, get away!" she shouted, instinctively stepping closer to him, but he was already reacting, the investigative journalist within him taking over. He turned, muscles taut as he assessed the situation, and just as the first rush of adrenaline surged, one of the attackers lunged at him in a blur of aggressive motion. David dodged, narrowly escaping as panic erupted around them, and in that frantic moment, the world shifted. As the chaos erupted, David's instincts kicked in, fighting back against the surprise assault. They barely escaped, the confrontation a furious blur of grunts and collisions, until finally, they found themselves panting in a dimly lit alley, the shadows indeed reminiscent of the dark sketch Emily had conjured. Emily's heart pounded violently, and for a moment, time hung suspended as David looked at her, realization dawning slowly across his features. The skeptics had become the witness. "Did you do this? Did your drawing bring them here?" he asked incredulously, searching her face for answers. Despite the palpable fear washing over her, she simply shook her head, too exhausted to feign confidence in her own narrative. She responded by saying that she didn't know, that her ability had never been so overtly dangerous before. The realness of it all consumed her, the ramifications of her talent forming tendrils of fear around her heart. David grabbed her by the shoulders, trying to make sense of the cascade of events. "I thought you were just a crazy artist, but now..." He paused, a new understanding emerging. "Now there's no denying it, is there?" In that moment of suspended disbelief, Emily knew she could no longer ignore the power she wielded, nor could David shy away from the hard truths that lay before him. Together, they stood at the precipice of fate, teetering on the edge of an unknowable future, the sketchbook of her past opening a doorway neither of them could yet comprehend. David had spent days scouring every inch of the city, convinced that if he could find Emily Kim, she might hold the missing piece to his investigation. With his heart racing from the adrenaline of countless late nights and near misses, the journalist prepared himself for a confrontation he knew would test his skepticism. When he finally located her in a quiet art cafe, his determination felt like electricity coursing through him. She was the embodiment of calm, surrounded by canvases, her fingers stained with charcoal, a stark contrast to the tumult of his own life. As he approached, a sense of urgency gripped him, demanding answers he both craved and feared. He found her sitting in a dimly lit corner, her eyes flickering with surprise as he stepped into her carefully curated world. "You need to tell me what you know," he said, an edge creeping into his voice. Emily's heart raced, caught between the familiarity of her artist's sanctuary and the intrusion of his relentless pursuit. Frustration curled in her chest as she felt the weight of his gaze. She was terrified of exposing her secrets. After a moment's hesitation, surrendering to the panic that made her palms clammy, she gestured for him to follow her to a more secluded area of the cafe where the whispers of other patrons faded into the background. Emily opened a wooden box tucked beneath the table, revealing her old sketchbooks, their pages curling with time and memories. "These aren't just drawings," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she flipped through the pages, each filled with sketches that had materialized into reality in uncanny, terrifying ways. She watched as David leaned closer, his brow furrowing in disbelief while his eyes scanned the detailed renditions of faces and scenes that mirrored both her artistry and her fears. "Every face I draw comes to life, whether I want it to or not, and I can't control it," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper, echoing through the silence that hung between them like an unspoken bond. David's skepticism didn't waver as he turned pages, jarring emotions flickering across his face like a film reel. Yet, he couldn't deny the chill pricking at the back of his neck when he recognized the image of a man he had seen on the news, the same man whose face had haunted Emily's pages. "You really expect me to believe all of this?" he questioned, skepticism lacing his tone, but there was a glimmer of curiosity that hinted at the cracks forming in his polished exterior. Emily felt a sense of frustration boiling within her as she breathed deeply, summoning the courage to confront the truth of her existence. "You don't have to believe me, but if you don't start taking this seriously, you're going to get hurt," she responded, her eyes locking onto his, searching for comprehension amidst his doubt. As they exchanged glances heavy with the weight of unspoken fears, David found it harder to cast aside the strange patterns filling the pages before him. Each sketch bore witness to lived experiences, some broken, others brutally vivid in their simplicity, and he wondered if perhaps, just perhaps, the truth lay intertwined in her artistry. Meanwhile, the specter of Michael Park loomed in the background, a reminder of a past entwined with danger. Michael, who had been more than a partner to David, had transitioned from ally to ominous shadow over the past few weeks. Just that morning, Michael had issued a warning, his voice gravelly and serious. "You need to drop this investigation, David. You have no idea how deep this goes," he had said, eyes hard with the weight of unsaid truths. David sensed something was amiss, the urgency in Michael's tone making the hairs on the back of his neck stand up, a reminder that the forces at play were more treacherous than he had initially believed. The tension between him and Emily crackled with unexamined potential, each drawing a tangible link in the invisible web of fate they were reluctantly spinning together. Emily began to grasp the threads of her abilities, fear coursing through her with stark clarity. "I can't just wait for the drawings to come true. I need to try to change them, not just to foretell what's to come," she declared, her determination igniting a spark within her weary heart. She was aware of the risks involved in tampering with destiny, yet as visions blurred in her mind, a collage of possibilities blending past and future, she felt that her hand was being guided by something deeper, an instinct she could not ignore. The resolve in her voice resonated with David, who suddenly found himself entangled in a world he had spent his life unraveling through stories, now turned tangible and terrifying. Together, the artist and the journalist stood at the precipice of an extraordinary partnership, teetering between the realms of fear and hope, embarking on a journey that threatened to redefine their existence and the very fabric of fate itself. As the days rolled into nights in the bustling heart of Seoul, Emily and David found themselves bound by an unsteady yet palpable connection forged under dire circumstances. Emily's studio, once her sacred sanctuary, became an urgent command center where the duo navigated the treacherous waters of conspiracy. The air was thick with both the smell of freshly sharpened pencils and the weighted tension that loomed over their every interaction. Emily, surrounded by a flurry of sketches, felt the thrill of purpose surge through her veins even as dread clung to her like a second skin. She spent hours hunched over her desk, charcoal smudging her fingers as she attempted to foresee the inevitability that threatened David's life. While he delved into layers of corruption that wrapped around influential figures, Emily transformed her fear into art, channeling her anxiety into images that might offer clues or, perhaps, a glimmer of hope. Each night was a battle against her insomnia, her mind racing with shadows of what she might find in her next drawing. On one particularly quiet evening, as rain tapped gently against the window, Emily immersed herself in her art. It was different this time, she felt the air vibrate with a sense of urgency. Each stroke was deliberate, wielded with the hope that this piece would alter their reality. As the scene unfolded beneath her skilled hand, hauntingly vivid and realistic, her heart dropped. She had drawn David, his lifeless body sprawled on the cold concrete of a parking garage, a dark crimson stain blossoming from his chest like a gruesome flower. The panic that seized her was suffocating, and she hurriedly placed the sketch face down, as if hiding it could somehow mitigate the vision it contained. In this moment, she felt tethered to a fate she desperately wanted to rewrite, but with each revelation came an avalanche of doubt. What could she do to change what was destined to happen? David, though outwardly composed, felt the weight of Emily's growing urgency. Each time she handed him a fresh drawing, his instincts screamed that they were becoming entwined in something greater than themselves, but he couldn't shake off the skeptical voice lingering at the back of his mind. Despite his doubts, he remained committed to the investigation, poring over documents that hinted at a vast web of corruption that wove through the city's elite. His eyes occasionally flicked toward Emily as she sat nearby, the faint glow of the lamp illuminating the concentrated furrow in her brow. He often found comfort in her presence, an anchor amidst his chaotic pursuit of truth. It was within their silences that unspoken words danced, an intricate rhythm of tension and acknowledgement swirling around them. Simultaneously, Sophia Choi, with her sharp instincts honed from years of competing against David in the relentless world of journalism, was starting to catch wind of her former lover's newfound companionship. Staring across the cafe through the fogged glass, she weighed the implications of David meeting Emily frequently, their secretive demeanor raising red flags. Sophia's mind raced. There were too many loose ends in David's life: his late nights, whispered conversations in shadows, and now this mysterious woman with a penchant for sketching. Each detail nagged at her like an itch she couldn't scratch, driving her to delve deeper into his activities, guided by an insatiable curiosity and an undercurrent of jealousy. She intended to uncover the truth, even if it meant exposing their past. As the days passed, Emily's sketches grew darker, reflecting her inner turmoil and fears. She struggled against the current of her emotions while desperately attempting to intervene in ways she believed could steer fate away from its grim course. Each time she caught a glimpse of David's figure, alive and vibrant in the real world, her heart would swell, filled with determination to protect him at all costs. She tried to whisper words of caution into the fabric of their reality, opting for small yet significant changes in her drawings, hoping to nudge fate in a new direction. However, as she stared at the haunting sketches, doubt began to seep into her heart. She wondered if her interventions were futile, mere attempts to play puppeteer against a fate that had already been drawn. Along with that uncertainty came the knowledge that every mark of her pencil might not just shape the future but could bind her and David even tighter to the chaos she sought to escape. Their uneasy partnership continued, fraught with the constant clash between Emily's premonitions and David's quest for justice. In this intricate dance, fear and hope intertwined like threads of a tapestry, leaving Emily wondering if all she could do was postpone the inevitable or if she still held the power to reimagine what lay ahead. The nights felt perpetually long, the weight of their shared reality settling like ash in the corners of her mind, waiting for the spark that might ignite either their salvation or their destruction. In the quiet hours before dawn, while shadows flickered against the walls of her studio, Emily sat breathlessly waiting for the final revelation that would determine the course of both their lives, caught in the swirling chaos of fate and free will, unsure which would ultimately prevail. As the days turned into weeks, Emily found herself engulfed in a storm of emotions as she spent more time with David. Their shared mission to unearth corruption had forged a bond that neither had expected, shifting from wary partnership to something far more profound. Each evening in her dimly lit studio, the scent of oil paint and the soft rustle of paper created an intimate atmosphere where their conversations flowed easily, charged with a mixture of tension and warmth. Light filtered in through the window, casting intricate shadows as David spoke about his investigation, his voice igniting that flicker of hope within her but also tightening the knot of anxiety in her chest. Yet, with every laugh shared, every moment of camaraderie, Emily felt the burden of her visions growing heavier, pressing against her conscience like a weight she could no longer ignore. It started subtly, little glimpses of darkness weaving their way into her sketches, her hands trembling as she drew an image of herself with tears streaming down her face, standing over a lifeless body. The ink smudged under her fingers, the horror of the scene riveting her heart with dread. Panic rose as she came to realize that the closer she drew to David, the more intense her sketches became, as though her gift was whispering ominous secrets she could not decipher. Frantic, she avoided their late-night strategy sessions, creating excuses that strained her bond but felt necessary to protect him. Unbeknownst to David, she believed that their connection could lead to a future she desperately wanted to alter. Every laugh or gentle brush of his hand was a reminder of the fate she feared was looming on the horizon. Meanwhile, in the shadows of David's life, Michael's demeanor grew increasingly unstable, his eyes haunted as he wrestled with his choices. Emily noticed the subtle shift in David whenever Michael's name surfaced, a flicker of discomfort crossed his features that he could not quite mask. It was as if Michael's presence loomed over their endeavors, an unpredictable variable that clouded the air between them. Each phone call Michael made, each late-night rendezvous he disappeared into, sparked a gnawing suspicion within David that maybe the trust he had placed in his friend was misplaced. Emily's unease about Michael paralleled his own as she tried to focus on art once more, pouring her thoughts onto canvas instead of allowing herself to spiral deeper into dread. She realized she was painting not with brushes, but with the heavy weight of decisions, the quiet fear of lost tracing lines and curves through her visions. The more David leaned into solving the conspiracy, the more Emily guarded the boundaries of her heart, afraid to let anyone in lest it crack open a dam of disaster. She could feel her resolve fracturing, and the sense of impending chaos thickened the air around them like a brewing storm, forcing her to pick up the pieces of her shattered confidence and retreat within her shell. It's for the best, she would reassure herself, reliving the images of her drawings. Yet, despite her efforts to push him away, David remained steadfast, tracing the edges of her isolation, probing the spaces she painstakingly tried to seal off. He picked up on her anxiety, the way her laughter seemed less genuine and her smiles more forced. "You can talk to me, Emily," he said gently one evening, after sensing the shadows creeping into her gaze. "I'm here to help, whatever it is." Despite his soothing voice, summons of darkness echoed in her mind, images flashing through her consciousness of painful fates that awaited them both. With every fiber of her being, she wanted to confide in him, to admit her fears, yet she found herself chin up and resolute. The weight of his life resting on her shoulders was no small burden. She looked deep into his attentive eyes and felt a pang, one that hinted at something greater than friendship blossoming. The weight of her secret became almost a living thing between them, creeping into those quiet moments where the world outside ceased to exist. She longed for him to understand the depths of her turmoil, but the fear of what that disclosure might unleash kept her bound in silence. She distanced herself, moments slipping through her fingers like sand, yet every time they were apart, she felt a connection stronger. It was a dangerous game, one that danced along the precipice of fate itself, and she couldn't shake the thought that every choice they made was interwoven with potential disasters. Each passing day mounted to an exhilarating crescendo, with the danger escalating around them, blurring the lines between friendship and the unthinkable, a bond that, if severed, could change the trajectory of their lives forever. Emily grappled with the grip of her talent, with the haunting idea that in their quest to uncover the truth, she might already have foreseen the worst possible outcome, and as such, she remained the cloak shrouded in darkness, yearning to chase the nightmare away while desperately trying to shield the man who unwittingly held her heart. David leaned heavily against his desk, the dim light of his cramped office casting shadows that danced across pages strewn with notes and photos. He had been on the brink of something monumental for weeks now, each lead pulling him deeper into a labyrinth of deceit that spanned not only the city but also into the highest echelons of power. It happened one sultry afternoon. While flipping through a police report from months ago, he spotted a seemingly innocuous document buried beneath layers of obfuscation, a list of names tied to a cover-up involving police misconduct, collusion with organized crime, and a wealth of blood-stained transactions. The names of high-ranking officials struck him like a lightning bolt, igniting a surge of adrenaline and determination in his chest. He knew this was the piece that would expose the rot at the heart of the system, the revelation that could shake the city to its core. David took a deep breath, his fingers tapping against the desk as he envisioned sharing this truth with the public, but as the excitement coursed through him, a sudden chill swept over the room. Just as he prepared to make the call that would change everything, his phone buzzed ominously, the vibration seeming to echo in the silence like a warning bell. When he glanced at the screen, his heart plummeted. It was a message from an unknown number, its terse content clear as day: walk away, or she dies. Meanwhile, in her quiet studio filled with the smell of paint and the soft rustle of the wind outside, Emily sat cross-legged on the floor surrounded by her sketchbooks. Each page was a world of its own, remnants of her past that she wished she could erase. Her thoughts were a storm of uncertainty and fear, stoked by the chilling echo of David's near-death experience she had witnessed just days ago. Distracted and desperate, she picked up her charcoal pencil, feeling the familiar weight in her hand, but this time it was different. This time, she intended to shape an outcome, to mold the future instead of merely peering into its depths. She closed her eyes and concentrated, visualizing a different narrative where David wasn't just surviving but thriving. The pencil danced across the paper, capturing a vibrant scene of David standing triumphantly at a press conference, revealing the corruption and holding those responsible accountable. She smiled faintly, feeling the warmth of hope blossom within her, but even as she drew, a flicker of doubt clouded her mind. Was she truly able to manipulate fate, or was she simply stuck in a cycle of fear and denial? In that very moment, something inexplicable occurred, a tremor of panic gripping her heart. Without her conscious decision, a new sketch began to form itself on the adjacent page in her sketchbook, a nightmarish image that was not born from her desire but from her deepest fears. It was David, slumped and unconscious, his face pale against the cold concrete of a garage floor. Standing over him, a shadow loomed: Michael, his expression obscured but his intentions unmistakably sinister. The shock of it sent a shiver down Emily's spine, her breath hitching as she dropped the pencil. Her hands trembled as she reached for the paper, the weight of the moment crashing over her like an unforgiving wave. Had she truly been wrong about her gift? She had thought she could draw alternate futures, but now this vision threatened to upend everything she believed. The panic began to spiral as the implications crashed over her. Should she have been altering reality at all? Every brushstroke had ramifications, each sketch was a brush with fate, and the revelation sent her tumbling down a path riddled with apprehension, leaving her grappling with the haunting realization that perhaps her abilities were not merely predictive but preordaining. In an instant, the lines between destiny and her desire blurred, and she was left trembling in uncertainty, the damning image of David lying vulnerable overshadowing any fleeting sense of hope she had worked so hard to cultivate. The night was heavy with an oppressive stillness, the air thick with unspoken emotions as David's heart raced with uncertainty. In a dimly lit abandoned warehouse, the flicker of a solitary bulb cast long shadows against cold concrete walls, where secrets lurked like ghosts. Michael Park stood there, his face a storm of conflict, betraying his inner turmoil. The once unbreakable bond of friendship now hung by a fragile thread, as accusations of loyalty and betrayal flickered between them like the wavering light. Michael knew he was trapped, a pawn in a dark chess game orchestrated by powerful figures whose whispers haunted his past. He took a deep breath, the weight of his words almost suffocating, and said that he had tried to protect David all this time, but the walls were closing in on him. He was on the brink of losing everything, forced to make an impossible choice. The tension in the air crackled as Emily arrived unexpectedly, her breathless figure bursting into the room like a desperate plea. She could feel the heavy presence of dread around them. Panic laced her voice as she pleaded with Michael to reconsider, to find another way out of this mess. Michael's eyes, usually so warm and reassuring, were now a mirror reflecting desperation and fear, and as he shook his head, Emily's heart sank. This wasn't just a conversation, it was a reckoning. David watched with growing dread, sensing the darkness swirling around him, heightening with every word exchanged. The sudden hardness in Michael's gaze was enough to send chills down Emily's spine. Michael was straddling a line, torn between friendship and survival, but the world had become a ruthless place, and survival had a price. Just as he opened his mouth to declare his intentions, the air shifted again, heavy with the scent of something ominous betrayal surfacing like poison. David's instincts flared, he could feel something was about to break. He stepped closer, voice steady but laced with fury as he demanded to know what Michael was planning, unable to reconcile the man he considered a brother with this image of betrayal standing before him. Michael's expression hardened, and he said that there was no other choice. The men hunting David were relentless, and they would stop at nothing. In that moment, panic turned into violence, and the air erupted as Michael lunged forward, cornered by his own fears. Emily gasped, an instinctual cry spilling from her lips as chaos unfolded. As fists flew and bodies collided, the warehouse became a crucible of desperation, echoing the violence of choices made in forces beyond their control. Emily felt a rush of helplessness. She had stepped into a tangled web where every thread wove with fate's cruel hands. Her mind raced, and in that moment of chaos, a revelation broke through the tumultuous storm in her heart. Her sketches were never fixed destinies, but possibilities, fluid and open to change with every decision they made. The realization struck her with a clarity that felt almost surreal. In the chaos of the unfolding confrontation, she began to grasp the power she held. If she could see the myriad ways life could twist, then perhaps she could guide them toward a better outcome. Her heart pounded, but she realized she had to act. As fists continued to clash, Emily closed her eyes, envisioning the tension, the fear, the violence, and in a moment of bravery, she focused on a new outcome, whispering a silent promise to herself and to David. She saw her sketches not as visions of doom but as maps to choices yet made, and in that instant, the fire of determination ignited within her. She rushed forward, propelled by a mixture of fear and newfound hope, calling out for them to stop, believing that she could rewrite the narrative before it was too late. Emily stood in her dimly lit studio, the air thick with the acrid scent of graphite and despair as she faced the rows of her sketchbooks, each one bearing witness to her haunting visions. The flickering candlelight cast shadows that danced ominously around the room, mirroring the turmoil within her. Each page held not just the depiction of a future she feared but the weight of guilt for the lives she felt she could not save. She knew that to keep these drawings was to harbor a darkness that could well predict the end for David, and with a resolute heart, she made a choice that felt like liberation. With trembling hands, she brought a match to the first book, watching as the flames licked at the pages, a suffocating warmth engulfing her. As she said goodbye to her past, the crackling sound of fire filled her with a strange sense of freedom. She wouldn't be bound by what might come any longer. Outside, the world was chaotic, with David and Michael confronting each other under a pale moon, the tension palpable as fists flew and truths unraveled amidst the shadows. David had always trusted Michael, but betrayal had poisoned their friendship, and now every punch thrown felt like a crescendo of lost loyalty. With each strike, Michael's motives became clearer, a desperate play driven by a desire to protect David even as he betrayed him. David, filled with sorrow and anger, shouted for Michael to put an end to this madness, but his words fell to deaf ears, lost in the fury of their fight. The alley bore witness to their struggle, the echoes of their past ringing louder than the present danger, and as the fight unfolded, the stakes pulled tighter around them. Emily, liberated from her visions but still entwined in their fates, felt a surge of urgency through her veins like an electric pulse, knowing she could not stand idly by. As the flames consumed her sketches, she found clarity within the chaos. She realized she could act with her heart rather than the fear that once gripped her artistry. Just as she made the decision to intervene, one of the men Michael staggered and lost his footing, drawing back as a sudden ferocity illuminated David's eyes. In that very moment of hesitation, a fatal shot rang out in the night, the sound echoing like a death knell. Michael, instinctively lunging to shield David, took the full brunt of the attack, collapsing in a pool of shadows and despair. David, horror-stricken, rushed to Michael's side as guilt and disbelief crashed over him like a tidal wave. Michael's breaths were shallow and ragged, blood seeping from his wounds as he laid bare a truth too painful to utter. He looked up at David, the corner of his mouth twitching in what could only have been a pained smile, and whispered, "Some fates can be rewritten. Some can't." It was a bittersweet revelation, the weight of their history pressing heavily between them, a bond marked by trust but also by the repercussions of choices made and paths forsaken. As Michael slipped into unconsciousness, Emily felt the full impact of every choice she had made, every moment leading to this heart-wrenching sacrifice. The flames from her felt untouched sketchbooks danced like treacherous spirits, yet she remained resolute, standing at the precipice of her newfound agency. Tears streamed down her face, mingling with the sweat from her brow as she rushed towards David, the truth dawning on her like the first light of dawn. She had the power not simply to predict but to change the narrative of what was to come. The storm of emotions waged within her as she fought back the tightness of fear, the uncertainty of whether she could live up to Michael's last words and rewrite a future that now seemed impossibly fraught. There was beauty within the chaos, a clarity amid the shrouded shadows that had long clouded her mind. She had stepped into the fire to transform fate, and in doing so, ignited a determination that promised to break free of the chains that had bound her for far too long. The air was thick with the remnants of chaos that had swept through the city in the wake of the scandal's exposure, a bitter reminder of the battles fought and the lives lost. David Lee stood at the edge of his apartment balcony, the cool breeze brushing against his skin and mingling with the faint sounds of sirens still echoing in the streets below. He looked out at the cityscape, the sun rising slowly behind the tall buildings, casting a golden hue over the skyline, an illusion of peace that felt harsh against the turmoil raging within him. The weight of Michael Park's sacrifice pressed heavily on his chest, a phantom pain that lingered long after the confrontation had ended. David remembered Michael's face, twisted with regret yet resolute in his final moments, and felt a deep sense of loss unfurling inside him. He replayed their last words, Michael's promise that some fates could be rewritten, haunted by the question of whether he had truly honored his friend's legacy or failed him by allowing the conspiracy to unfold as it did. Meanwhile, across town, Emily Kim sat in the stillness of her studio, the air thick with the scent of paint and the soft echoes of her brushes against canvas. The room was brighter than it had ever been, the sunlight pouring through the large windows illuminating the blank canvas that had become a symbol of her newfound resolve. After the upheaval, she had torn her past sketches to shreds, a cathartic release, a rejection of the fears that had dictated her life for far too long. With every tear, she felt lighter, as if shedding not just paper but the weight of her predestined visions, the shadows of what could have been. Yet, the emptiness in her sketchbook mirrored the uncertainty flooding her heart, each blank page a reminder of the possibilities ahead, its starkness unsettling yet liberating in equal measure. As she mulled over her decisions, she felt a wave of bittersweet relief. David was alive, yes, but at what cost? Had her attempts to wrestle with fate merely delayed another heartbreak, another looming tragedy? Overwhelmed by her thoughts, Emily sank back into her chair, her gaze drifting to the remnants of her past works that now lay scattered around her like fallen leaves, testaments to a gift she once saw as a curse. She recalled the tension shared with David, the electric moments punctuated by urgency and fear, steadily consuming her in a way that felt both exhilarating and dangerous. They were two souls caught in a relentless dance of fate and choice, but now, with the storm having passed, uncertainty loomed before her like an unwritten story, aching for her to pen its next chapter. She pondered whether she would ever be able to draw again, her hand trembling at the thought of reviving the shadows she had once created, the pain they had brought too raw to confront. Meanwhile, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, David took a step back from the balcony, closing his eyes as he took a deep breath to regain his composure. He could almost feel the presence of Emily slipping into his thoughts, her vibrant spirit lingering like a melody that refused to fade. For days, he had found solace in her memory, contemplating the bond they forged amidst the turmoil and realizing that their connection had seeded something precious within him, a flicker of hope. Yet, it was a complicated hope, entangled with grief and questions about what it all meant moving forward. Would they always be haunted by the past, or could they find a way to create a new narrative, one unfettered by the fingers of fate? As he thought of confronting Emily, a new determination surged through him, fueled by a desire to not just move past the shadows of their shared history but also to embrace the uncertainty together. David knew he had to find her, there was no other path. He felt a warmth blossom in his chest as he remembered all the moments they had shared, the laughter amidst fear, the glances that spoke volumes, the whispers of dreams intermingling with the pulse of danger. If they could face down a conspiracy together, surely they could navigate the quiet aftermath and find a way to build something new amid the rubble of their past. In that moment of clarity, David resolved not to let fear dictate their future. He would take the step forward he had been avoiding, ready to embrace whatever came next, both for himself and the woman who had become so inexplicably vital to his heart. As he left the apartment, the determination etched on his features reflected a newfound understanding of life's unpredictable nature, one that held both darkness and light in balance. Unbeknownst to him, Emily had begun to see the world in a similar light, contemplating the power she held and the responsibility it bore. That day, as distant as it felt, inching closer to a future that was unscathed by fear, both were finally awakening to the possibility of creation both in art and in life. And that anticipation, laced with uncertainty, began to feel like a promise of hope, a gentle reminder that perhaps, just perhaps, not everything drawn was destined to repeat itself. Months later, in the warm glow of her studio, Emily sat before a blank sketchbook, the faint sound of the city outside creating a serene backdrop to her swirling thoughts. The chaos of the past felt like a distant storm, yet still, every emotion resonated within her. The memory of Michael's sacrifice lingered like a shadow, a reminder of the price paid for freedom. David entered the room, the familiar presence igniting a spark of nostalgia and unspoken connection. His eyes swept across the walls adorned with her art, each piece a chapter of her journey, and he could see the silence that hung heavy in the air. When she confessed that she hadn't drawn since that fateful night, a flicker of concern crossed his face. He understood the weight of her silence, yet he refused to let her succumb to it. Instead of urging her to pick up the pencil, he chose a different approach. He reached for a pencil and handed it to her gently, his gaze steady and encouraging. She felt the coolness of it against her palm, and with it came a wave of realization. The power lay not in predictions, but in the creation of her own path. As she hesitated, uncertainty clouding her mind, he encouraged her with a soft smile, reminding her that every line she drew was an invitation to explore possibilities rather than just a record of fate. Emily's breath caught as she felt the thrill of her own agency for the first time in months. She began to sketch, her movements cautious yet filled with newfound purpose, allowing the pencil to dance across the blank page. Each stroke felt liberating, the figures she created coming to life with the essence of hope rather than the lingering echo of despair. As her confidence blossomed, she lost herself in the art, the outside world fading away until all that existed was her imagination unfurling on the paper before her. David stood silently beside her, watching the transformation unfold, a gentle reassurance that he would always be by her side. Unexpectedly, images began to emerge on the page, vibrant and alive, pulsating with energy that she had feared would never return. A couple, embracing, laughter dancing between them, a vision of joy. It was a scene she never could have predicted months ago, an exploration of love, dreams, and the beautiful unpredictability of life. In that moment, everything clicked, and Emily realized that she was no longer just managing destinies, she was crafting her own story, one stroke at a time. Yet, just as she felt the warmth of creation, a sudden chill swept through the room, and David's expression shifted, tension prickling the air. Outside, a news alert blared, a breaking story echoing the remnants of the conspiracy they had thought buried, unearthing more secrets, darker threads unraveling. Emily's heart raced, each beat a reminder that while she was forging a new future, shadows from the past were still lurking, waiting to challenge their newfound peace. Their eyes locked, and in that moment it became clear the uncertainty they embraced was a double-edged sword, beauty intertwined with danger. As the last stroke settled on the page, a sense of inspiration melded with fear. Emily and David stood together, aware that while they were moving forward, unseen forces were still in play, and the future remained as unpredictable as a brush dipped in paint. With a shared glance, they understood that their journey wasn't over, it had merely entered a new phase, one filled with potential yet shadowed by the remnants of their past. The canvas of their lives lay before them, vast and unexplored, ready for their touch. With David beside her, Emily breathed in deeply, ready to face whatever would come next, knowing that together, they would carve their own destiny once and for all. And in the corners of her mind, she could already sense yet another narrative was waiting to unfold, their stories intricately woven into the tapestry of existence, each chapter more thrilling than the last, and the promise of adventure lingering just around the corner. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to Happiness of Love. That way, you won't miss any of our heartfelt romances. See you in the next love story.